I'm sorry.
I don't understand. None of it. It's a bit strange. What are you trying to say, Roy?
The video begins with a shot of a house covered in oddly scribbled sticky notes. A guy suffers from the catastrophic consequences of Alzheimer's disease caused by substance misuse, which was discovered after a serious accident. Roy is a respected, seasoned police detective with an impressive resume. Roy is now retired and receiving deep brain stimulation therapy to promote memory recall. Doctors have advised him against using alcohol or stimulants during therapy, both of which contribute to his Alzheimer's. One morning, Roy receives a call from the Prisoners' Legal Rights Association to discuss an old case he investigated and prosecuted years ago. When the association representative arrives at the meeting place, he hands over the case file, noting that the prisoner requested to meet Roy because he said he was not a murderer. Roy, still astonished by his memory loss, returns home to search for previous case files on the subject. He meticulously examines each victim's photograph and every detail in the report. A recollection flashes past, but he is unable to recall it. The next day, he goes to the prison to meet Isaac, who was convicted of planning to assassinate Professor Wider. Isaac explains that after a calm time behind bars facing death row, he realized that fear and coercion had caused him to sign the confession, not the truth. He recounts the night of the incident. Isaac heard someone else enter the professor's residence as he proceeded to steal. Isaac fled before he could see the assailant as there were shouts from Wider and noises of fighting. Roy can't recall anything and is perplexed by Isaac's narrative. But Roy is intrigued by the situation after being struck by Isaac's eagerness and manner. Roy starts looking into it when Isaac says he just met Richard, who says he wrote a biography about the incident and the killer's identity. As Roy gets home, he carefully examines the paperwork and considers what Isaac said. He finds out that his former colleague Remus has been interrogating Richard and decides to visit him. Standing at the doorstep of his longtime colleague's house feels strangely unfamiliar to Roy. He discloses his memory loss problem to Remus. In response, Remus talks about his present difficulties, including losing his wife to cancer a year ago and being broke from her medical bills. Remus offers Roy a beer during their talk, but Roy turns it down since it would affect his therapy. Additionally, Roy requests that Remus find Richard so that Isaac's case may be reopened. Days later, while Roy is going over the photos, Remus calls to tell him that he has located the person he was searching for. After seeing Richard's recent death, which is thought to have been caused by a drug overdose, Roy goes to the morgue with his old co-worker. In a fleeting moment, Roy vaguely recalls encountering this person somewhere before. He then attends the victim's funeral and approaches the deceased's brother to dig deeper. There he discovers that Richard had never used drugs, let alone overdosed like a heavy addict. Richard's brother immediately gives Roy his sibling's narrative. Back at home, Roy investigates, learning several riddles regarding the man's past. Richard had been intrigued by a gifted woman called Laura since their first meeting. She was a brilliant graduate student, and they finally became inseparable in their endeavors. Laura also introduced her boyfriend to Professor Gillan, who was quite supportive. The three of them shared a happy meal at the professor's residence. Laura suggested to the professor that Richard be hired as a caretaker and librarian, which excited Richard as it gave him easy access to new knowledge. During his time there, he uncovered the murky relationship between Laura, his girlfriend, and Gillan. Laura was merely using him to gain access to the professor and steal his study manuscript. She also purposely exposed Richard to her personal gestures with Gillan, wanting to arouse his jealousy and lead him into confronting the professor for her gain. Richard later got skeptical of Laura after she vanished without a trace following Gillan's tragedy. Later, the professor's study article for a Defense Department program was published, and Laura was recognized as the author, catapulting her to prominence as a renowned scientist. After reading through Richard's memoir, Roy realizes it abruptly stops without any leads. That night, he invites his old friend Remus to a bar to share all the details he uncovered recently. Remus claims that every evidence at the crime site, including buried fingerprints, pointed to Isaac and had nothing to do with Laura. Remus said that all of the evidence at the crime site, including the buried fingerprints, pointed to Isaac and had nothing to do with Laura. Roy's professional instincts kicked in as a result of his past as an exceptional detective, and he couldn't resist the impulse to find Richard's wife in order to learn more about him. The wife said that her husband's absence appeared to be tied to a girl called Elizabeth, whom Richard spoke with often. She also expressed suspicions that this woman might have harmed her husband. The next day, Roy went to the hospital to continue his Alzheimer's treatment with deep brain stimulation therapy, briefly recounting his moments of recollection to the doctors. They saw this as a good indicator of cognitive development, giving Roy hope for conquering this crippling condition. Roy went online that evening to look for information on Elizabeth. To his amazement, he learned that this lady was Laura, who had changed her identity to hide any ties to the professor's case and was now a well-known scientist. Roy paid a visit to Elizabeth, Laura, before she left for work the next morning to notify her of Richard's unexpected absence. Her demeanor, however, remained constant when she heard the news. Roy also revealed that Richard knew something about Professor G's case involving her and had given his memoir to her. Back at home, while taking his prescription, Roy suddenly remembered seeing Laura in the past but couldn't recollect any further information. That afternoon, Roy drove to follow the next guide, a former maid at Professor G's estate who is now hiding and working as a butcher. This guy stated that he had served as a mercenary in Iraq and later had post-traumatic stress disorder, which Professor Geuer cured using a medicine he produced. Although moderately successful, it created substantial negative effects, prompting the maid to discontinue usage of the medicine. The maid also knew that the professor had inappropriate relationships with many of his patients and even had a perverse hobby of recording intimate moments on tape. Among these women was a bartender whom Roy had frequented before. Following that, the maid volunteered to accompany Roy home and stated her desire for him to revisit the case. He seemed anxious and promptly phoned. Laura soon went to meet Roy and read Richard's biography about the case. Meanwhile, Remus, Roy's colleague, observed from the outside. When questioned by Roy, Laura disputed all of the information in the memoir, including having ever been in a relationship with Richard. Of course, Laura categorically denied any role in Professor G's death. Roy found that the professor was working on a wonder medicine to assist military personnel forget traumatic memories of combat. After the professor's death, Laura stole the entire research project, published it in books, and became a famous and wealthy scientist. Roy suspected that the purpose for the crime was to take this study document, and he did not hesitate to approach Laura about his thoughts. Roy's car was purposely rear-ended the following evening on his way home, but he responded immediately when he heard the engine start and fired a number of rounds at the driver. Approaching the automobile, he learned that the driver who had attacked him was none other than the professor's maid. The next day, at a pub, Roy was informed by his colleague Remus that the police had discovered a syringe with stimulants in Richard's car, indicating that it was the chemical used to inject Richard, implying that the maid was to blame for his death. Hearing that, Roy was really surprised, not understanding why the maid would harm Richard. Perhaps he was involved in the murder of Professor Geuer and was afraid that Richard had evidence against him, causing him to kill Richard. But it's remarkable since Richard never mentions the maid in his biography about the case. Instead, he almost exclusively blames Laura. The more Roy thought about it, the more perplexed he grew, especially after Remus persuaded him to abandon revisiting the case and accept the findings of the previous inquiry. Roy abruptly turned to Remus and questioned, "Was I ever a good cop?" "Yes, very good. You're the best detective in town," Remus responded. Roy inquired because he thought it peculiar that the whole Geuer case file only included Remus' signature, although all previous cases they worked on jointly included both of their signatures. This aroused suspicion towards Roy. Did Remus intentionally hide something about the old investigation results? Finally, Roy's former ally spoke up in frustration. "Are you here to accuse me? Do you believe I was involved in it?" Then Remus stormed out. Intoxicated by his grief, Roy neglected his own health. Oddly enough, Roy remembered more details the more he drank. He previously returned to sit at this pub and drank this identical bottle of wine. While he was drinking the entire bottle by himself, he became aware that the waitress was still recurring in his hazy recollection. When Roy went back to the same tavern the following morning to inquire about the woman's location, the bar owner told him that she had died a few years before. Roy then visited the scene of Professor G's murder, where fragmented memories continued to appear in his mind. He recalled that a baseball bat that had been stolen from the professor's storage had been identified as the murder weapon during the crime scene investigation that he and Remus had conducted here. In his reverie, Roy started scanning the place with the keen intuition of a professional investigator. He probed the soft dirt where the murder weapon had been hidden with a coat hanger. The police had never discovered this crucial piece of evidence previously, which subtly confirmed to Roy that the case was undoubtedly extremely complex. Laura and her co-worker, Remus, suddenly showed up brandishing guns, and Remus motioned for everyone to enter. Here, Roy began to suspect that his colleague had colluded with Laura to harm the professor. In fact, Roy had known for a long time that Remus had taken on a large debt to cover the costs of his wife's cancer treatment. However, Laura immediately denied paying Remus to fight the professor. She admitted to only stealing her mentor's research to publish it under a new name, Elizabeth, taking her career to the next level. From Laura's dirty deeds, Remus and Richard collected evidence and threatened to expose everything and blackmail her. Remus vehemently denied Laura's accusations, turning the tables on her, claiming that she had manipulated the former maid to use him to murder Richard. The unsuccessful attempt to hit Roy with a car was also staged by her. Laura, with her expertise in psychology, was very good at manipulating others from the shadows. She merely snaps her fingers. Now she went on with her vile ploys, making up things that seemed convincing. She eventually tried to make Roy a puppet once more so he could battle his trusted co-worker, but she was unsuccessful. When Remus attempted to disclose the truth about Professor Gewer's true killer, Laura, seeing that she couldn't argue, abruptly drew a revolver and shot him. Remus tried to pull the trigger and save his friend's life, but she persisted in pointing the pistol to kill Roy. That nasty woman got her just desserts. Before closing his eyes, Remus whispered, "Everything you do is for the good of Roy." Events happened so quickly that Roy went from one surprise to another, but in the end, he still could not find out, or rather remember, who the real killer of Professor Gewer was. Roy then called the police to recount the entire thing. He had sufficient evidence to demonstrate that Isaac, the prisoner, had been falsely charged, even if he was unable to pinpoint the ultimate offender. Roy came over a shattered picture frame on his way home to organize case files. All of Roy's recollections flooded back as he recognized the face in the picture. The woman who worked at the pub turned out to be his wife, who had dated a dishonest professor. The amazing thing is that the person who murdered him was none other than Roy. Laura purposefully played a tape recording of Roy's wife and Professor Gewer's private moments, detailing their long-running extramarital affair the day before the crime. She wanted to get rid of the not-so-noble professor by seducing Roy, a guy who was blinded by love for his wife. That woman's unbridled greed ultimately led to the crime by using all men, even the talented investigator, as pawns and ultimately losing everything. This is where the film finishes. Thank you everyone for watching until the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel.